Assalamualaikum and hi everybody. Today I will tell you guys about calcium phosphate in agriculture. Is it effective as fertilizer? But before we start, let me tell you about calcium phosphate. Calcium phosphate, or also called as tricalcium diphosphate. Calcium phosphate is a white solid that we can actually found in a living organism like a bone mineral. Calcium phosphate melting point is at 1670 Celsius and it often decomposes before reach its boiling point. Calcium phosphate density is 3.14 grams centimeter cubic and it is insoluble in ethanol but soluble in diluted nitric acid. Also, it is slightly dissolved in water. During olden day, rock phosphate is used as fertilizer, but however, it is low of phosphorus concentration. Because of that, nowadays gardeners use the processed version of rock phosphate that contain soft rock phosphate. This is because the calcium and phosphorus in soft rock phosphate is more accessible than the hard rock phosphate. Nowadays, it serves as an all-purpose fertilizer for different kinds of plants.
Here is an example of calcium phosphate structure. The calcium, which is metal, is bonded with the non-metal phosphate ion by ionic bonds, while the non-metal phosphorus is bonded with non-metal oxygen by covalent bond. So, this structure is involving ionic and covalent bond.
And right now, I'm going to pass it to Sabrina.
So, what is function of calcium phosphate? I will explain about it, but I want to share how calcium works first. Calcium is important for plants to produce tissue to carry out basic metabolic function and store food and water. And calcium also enables plants to grow better. Second, it is responsible for plant cell division and holding the cell wall together for more strength. Then, calcium can activate a specific plant enzyme to send a signal to coordinate certain growth activity. Now, we will look at the phosphorus function. It helps in conversion of other nutrients into usable building blocks for plants to grow on. When we use high phosphate fertilization, it increases plant disease resistance and subsequent phosphate accumulation increases susceptibility to fungal pathogen infection. Lastly, it enhances plant development and seed production so they can bloom well. Move on to the function of calcium phosphate. There are a lot of functions of it. So first, calcium phosphate is a very slow and weak phosphate fertilizer. It is almost useless in alkaline soil. To speed up the process, we can add compost and help from mycorrhizal fungi. The acidic nature from compost can allow the chemical bond to loosen. Then, calcium and phosphorus are both plants' micronutrients and required in large quantity for healthy plant growth. Unlike in acidic soil, it is available and functions as a slow-release fertilizer. This way, the phosphorus can be absorbed by the plant's roots. Next is fertilizer that contain calcium phosphate is dissolved into soil water to form calcium ion and phosphate ions. And then, rock phosphate requires specific soil conditions for optimum performance. So here I want to explain about the step of phosphorus cycle. First is weathering. Phosphorus is found in the rock in abundance. That's why the phosphorus cycle starts in the Earth's crust. The phosphate cells are broken down from the rocks. These cells are washed away into the ground where they mix in the soil. Second is absorption by plants. The phosphate salt dissolved in water are absorbed by the plants. However, the amount of phosphorus present in the soil is very less. That is why the farmer apply phosphate fertilizer on agricultural land. Third is absorption by animals. The animal absorb phosphorus from the plants or by consuming plant-eating animals. The rate of the phosphorus cycle is faster in plants and animals when compared to rocks. And the last step is return of phosphorus back to the ecosystem. When the plants and animals die, they are decomposed by microorganisms. During this process, the organic form of phosphorus is converted into the inorganic form. which is recycled to soil and water. Soil and water will end up in sediment and rock, which will again release phosphorus by weathering. Thus, the phosphorus cycle starts over. I will pass to the Fatiha to explain more detail about the calcium phosphate.
We know how important phosphorus and calcium to the plants. Now let's take a look when a plant lack of phosphorus and calcium. So when a plants don't get enough of phosphorus, their stem will become weaker and their leaves turn into dark bluish green. So what happens if a plant don't get enough of calcium? In that case, we can see through their leaves that become curled, and also lack of calcium can cause the death of terminal buds and root tips, and also their growth will shorten. Now let's take a look on the benefits of calcium phosphate as a fertilizer. Next, calcium phosphate also can help plants to absorb more nutrients. The third benefits of calcium phosphate as a fertilizer is it can provide consistent source of essential micronutrients. Besides, calcium phosphate also helps the development of buds and a stronger root system. Lastly, calcium phosphate can help to reduce pests on the plants. Now, I will invite Jashadia to explain about the effectiveness of calcium phosphate as a fertilizer.
Using calcium phosphate as a fertilizer is not very effective. Since calcium phosphate is basically an alkaline substance, it makes calcium phosphate unsuitable for the use in alkaline soil due to the weak absorption. The phosphorus which in this fertilizer can lead to water source pollution because some of the fertilizer remain insoluble. The remaining insoluble phosphorus is hard to be absorbed by the root and may flow into the nearest water source such as river or lake. Too much phosphorus in the water can cause increased growth of algae and large aquatic plants, which can result in decreased levels of dissolved oxygen. This process is well known as eutrophication. High levels of phosphorus can also lead to algae blooms that produce algal toxins which can be harmful to human and animal health. In conclusion, it is better to reduce the usage of calcium phosphate fertilizer by the farmers that are planting in a site with nearby water source. Also, self-gardener can use the organic homemade calcium phosphate fertilizer since the demand of nutrients in the soil with small number of plants is not that much. If you want to learn how to make your own calcium phosphate fertilizer using organic ingredients, you can scan this code.